Right, so a little bit of an update on the Triumph Sprint 955i project. So I've got the day off work today and I've been doing a bit of work on the bike. So the sockets, the thin-walled socket that I needed to get the spark plugs out arrived off eBay. I bought one on eBay and it arrived through the week while I was at work. Okay, so I've managed to get the spark plugs out. Okay, so the good news is the spark plugs are quite good condition. Um, they're not too worn. I don't think they've done a huge amount of mileage, which kind of tells me that the bike has been serviced until, maybe just before it was put away, wherever it was put away, kind of thing. Um, so that's one good thing. Okay, so then the not so good news is regarding the compression pressures. Okay, so uh, I went to test the compression pressures with my compression tester kit, and unfortunately, my old compression tester kit basically was not working, bits missing, bits broken, all the rest of it. It was no good, really. Didn't manage to test the compression with that this morning. So I called Euro Car Parts. They had one in stock at one of the stores near where I live. So jumped in the car, drove to Euro Car Parts, got a new compression tester for like 27 quid, whatever it was. Um, and I have then tested the compression on all three cylinders. At which point I kind of got the bad news. Cylinders 1 and 2, I'm only getting 100 psi, or a little over 100 psi, and cylinder 3 I'm getting 120 psi. So I looked on the internet, and the internet reckons sort of should be kind of 160 to 170 psi. But I wasn't going to trust the internet, so I called a Triumph dealer in Edinburgh, and they told me. I asked them about it, and that they couldn't get an exact pressure from their manual. I think their manuals don't go back as far as year 2000 bikes. It's too old, really, for them to have exact kind of specific information. But he did speak to one of the workshop technicians who said that it should definitely be north of 150 psi, and ideally probably about 175, something like that. Okay, so basically it's low compression. I strongly suspect that will be due to valve clearances, because I've had this before with bikes, low compression, when I had my Kawasaki ZX6R just after I bought that and it wouldn't start. Had a bit of a saga with that, and basically, cut a long story short, it turned out to be the valve clearances. So I ended up machining the shims down a bit using a Dremel and managed to get the psi up to about 130 per cylinder and got the bike running that way. I'm probably not going to be able to do that with the Triumph, because the shims in the Kawasaki are the little tiny ones, like the size of one of those really tiny watch batteries. I can't remember what you call them, CR something or other, the really minuscule ones. That's what the shims are like in a Kawasaki. In the Triumph, the shims are different. They're more like the size of a pound coin or something. They're a bit bigger, and if you think about it, I can't really machine that flat with a Dremel. I'm not going to be able to do that because I wouldn't be able to get a decent sort of flat surface, so it's not going to be any good. So I'm going to have to buy shims. So that's the bad news. The good news is the Triumph dealer says the shims, it depends exactly which version of the bike it is. It'll be between about £4 and £7 per shim. Okay, so like 12 valve engine, it's going to be under 100 quid, probably like 50 to 100 quid for the shims that I'm going to need, depending how many shims it need. It might not need all of them, but it'll maybe need some of them. So so that's kind of it. So that's kind of it with that, really. So obviously I want to do other work on the bike while I'm waiting for the shims. What I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to go down into the garage again, and I'm going to check the valve clearances, okay, and see actually you know, how far out they are and how many shims I need, but I'm not going to do that right now because it's really hot today. And it's my garage is like a sauna inside because the sun just beats down on the roof of the garage and it's too hot, so I can't work in there now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some other things. And what I've done is I brought some parts into the house, which is a bit cooler, and I'm going to do some other bits and pieces which I'm going to talk about now. Right, so I brought a few things into the house to work on. Particularly, I brought in the throttle bodies, and I brought in the injectors, and I brought in the fuel pump assembly from the tank. So I brought these in last weekend, and what I've done is I've given the throttle bodies a really good clean, or as clean as I can get them. They were absolutely filthy. I have scrubbed them up with kind of like household cleaning wipes. I've also put them in the kitchen sink and scrubbed them with hot water and fairy liquid to try and get them as sort of degreased as I can. I've also used like toothpicks and knives and wee tiny brushes and all sorts of different things that I've used to try and get things clean, to get these springs clean. Springs are all kind of grungy and greasy. I've managed to get them kind of quite clean now, and like the screws and all of those up. Obviously it's not, you know, they're not like new condition. They're never going to be like new condition, obviously, because that, you know, it's a 26-year-old bike, 80,000 miles, so obviously they're not going to be perfect, but I think they're an awful lot better than they were. So that's kind of what they're looking like now, a lot fresher than they were. I've cleaned all the surfaces, I've scraped all the surfaces with a razor blade to get all the stuck on gasket material off on that side. I've also cleaned inside them. I've cleaned the throttle butterflies a bit, kind of as much as I can. It's quite difficult to get in there and really get them properly clean, but I've done the best I can with it, and I think they're much improved. So that's that. I've cleaned the injectors and the fuel rail as much as I can. Again, this was absolutely filthy. I've kind of degreased it with wipes and all sorts. I haven't washed this in fairy liquid because apparently you're not supposed to use household detergent on fuel injectors. It's not very good for them. I can't remember why. I just read that on the internet somewhere. It's not a very good idea to do that. So I've left the fuel injectors alone, and I've just wiped them basically with household wipes and cleaned them up with like old toothbrush and all that sort of thing. So I've got the fuel rail and the injectors quite clean as well, so I'm quite pleased with that. So that's gone reasonably well. And then what I've done is I've also brought this fuel pump assembly in. So we've got this, and so what I'm going to do, there's a few different things I'm going to do with this afternoon, assuming it all goes to plan. So I'm going to replace the fuel filter because I'm assuming this filter is probably quite old. So I've got a new filter from the bike dealers. I'm going to put that in. It's going to need a new gasket to put it back in as well. So what I did was I measured this with the digital calipers. It's just under 4mm thick. I've got some gasket rubber, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new Ghetto gasket to replace this one, and I'm also going to test the fuel pump because I don't know for sure that the fuel pump's working. It probably is. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be, but just again, because it's an old bike and high mileage, I'm gonna just like jerry rig it to a battery and just see if I can just like turn it on just for a couple of seconds just to hear if it actually runs. Obviously I don't want to run it for very long when it's dry because that's maybe not going to do it a lot of good, but I reckon just a wee tiny little, you know, just a couple of seconds or something just to see if it works is probably going to be okay. So that's basically what I'm going to be working on this afternoon. I've had a look at my Stanley knife blades, and unfortunately they're all a bit dull, and they're not going to be very good for cutting gasket rubber. So what I did was I looked in my kitchen drawers and I found these set of kitchen knives that I bought from Lidl's ages ago, and I've never really used them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one now because they are nice and sharp, so they're ideal for this. So I'm going to have a go at cutting this gasket rubber around these throttle bodies. So let's see how this goes. so hold on a sec. Okay, so with a bit of kind of firm downward pressure and quite a sharp knife, I've managed to get quite a clean cut in that gasket rubber. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue that around the throttle body. That's about halfway around one of them. Now the tricky bit is going to be getting under here. Okay. No, it's not completely cut around there. These corner bits are very awkward to get into with the knife. I think that's maybe done it. Okay, so that's most of the way around the first one. Right, I think that should be it. Right, there we go. Right, so there we go. So I've got a throttle body gasket there. All I need to do is make holes in that for the bolts, and that's that done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a go at the others now. Right, so that is now a set of 3 throttle body gaskets made to fit the throttle bodies. So as you just saw in the video earlier on, I cut around the outside of them to get the outside shape. Unfortunately, kind of cutting the inside shape is a bit more difficult because you can't really get the knife down inside the throttle bodies. Well, I could, but it would be very difficult because the knife's almost as fat as the throttle bodies are, and they're quite deep as well. So basically what I did was I just took some measurements with the digital calipers. I just got the digital calipers and I measured the inside of the venturi. So that's like 42.5 mil that way by about 33.5 mil that way, and then I just measured it out on the bits of rubber, and then sort of cut around and just sort of did it by eye and did it by a bit of trial and error. I just trimmed a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. Lots of trimmings you can see there. Lots of marks where I've been working on the cardboard. So obviously they're not a work of art. I mean, they're not, they're not perfect, but I think they're near enough and they should do the job. They should be sufficient to seal it, and I've managed to get sort of enough of the material trimmed from around the venturi that's not really obstructing the venturi, because obviously I don't want to mess up the airflow, because if you mess up the airflow that's kind of probably going to spoil the bike's performance. I don't know how much difference it would actually make if there was a bit hanging over the corner or something, but it's just not really ideal. But as you can see, I've managed to really kind of get it trimmed away, and pretty much kind of, it's not exactly flush obviously because I can't, just doing it by eye, I can't get it exactly right, but I've got it near enough that I reckon it'll work. So it'll be a case of just putting like a smear of grease on the throttle bodies, stick them down, and then put a smear of grease on the engine, and just stick them on, and then bolt them and torque them, and hopefully with a bit of grease and the new gaskets it should make a good seal. That's what I'm hoping. But obviously I won't find out until I actually install them. I don't know when I'm going to be installing them because I've got lots of other things to do on the bike, and I'm not going to put them in until I'm sort of at the stage of building the bike up rather than kind of tearing it down and cleaning it. Right, so moving on to something different now. To take the bike apart, I'm finding that I've got some rusty bolts, particularly these ones here. I want to get this under tray out because it's disgusting and it needs a really good clean. But I can't get these bolts out because they're rusted in and the heads are kind of like just rubbish. They're kind of up underneath, and I I can't get them out with the socket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them off. So I brought this thing. This is an angle grinder. It's a Civis, if that's how you pronounce it. It was about 12 quid off eBay. So obviously it's a very cheap angle grinder, very small, battery powered. But we're going to see how we get on with this. See if it'll actually cut through these bolts. Hopefully it will. Let's give this a bash.